Hey, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Dawn Thompson with my co-host Nicole Harlow. And today I'm very excited to be joined with Traci Doula, who is, at this point becoming a mega influencer on social media in the birth world. And just quite frankly, as both of us as doula advocates in the world of social media, she does it way better than me. You're so much more diplomatic and like all those things, and I just am not good at it. All my posts seem to be like dripping in sarcasm and frustration, and I love the way that you deliver your message, and we're just thrilled to have you here. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Well, thank you. I don't know how good I am at this. There are sometimes I have to delete all kind of things, thinking that's not how I wanted that to land. But I'm Traci. I have been a birth worker for 26 years. I have to count. And feel like I have been doing this and seeing the ebbs and flows of trending things in birth culture, which I think is a huge benefit. I have 4 wonderful children. I am a Mimi to 2 grandbabies, and just living my best life and hoping to just educate on the things that we don't get from our care providers, whether they don't have the education, which I don't think people realize that providers are not educated in some of the things that childbirth educators and doulas are, or they just don't have the time. So I feel like that has been my biggest passion through this whole journey of finding myself in places personally that just had a lot of education gaps, and I thought, well, if I'm getting them, I know everybody else is too. And then just dove into the default of just being at births, and whether that was at home births or hospital births. I'm in Alabama, so the majority of people here are going to go to the hospital, so I found myself just meeting the need and not really finding my own path in that. So I just have just a really well-rounded perspective on birth everywhere. Home birth doesn't necessarily mean in the middle of a daisy field, and hospital birth doesn't mean that it's all bad all the time.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, I love that you said that, and I think it's really important, we make this point all the time, but I was literally in the shower yesterday. This is what I think about in the shower. It's sad, but I was just like, birth is not put in a box. Like, any kind of birth is like so individualized, right? And I think the systems of America, like either, again, hospital, home, birth center, freestanding birth center, in the woods, howling at the moon, like, it's so individualized. And I know all 4 of us, or all 3 of us have 4 kids, so that's pretty cool. But, well, Dawn, I know you have 2 bonus kids, but have birthed 4 kids, and it's just like looking back at my own, births, and then looking at friends' births and family births, and then, looking into clients and, beyond, right? Like, it's just so not a straight line, and our very linear system wants us to just walk this line. And I think that's where education becomes so important, because unfortunately you have to be educated on it all, because you don't know which way it's going, right? Like, that's also, it's like the most uncertain thing in the whole world, which is some of the grandeur and the magic of it, but then also like what leaves us, to be sometimes a victim of it, because we're putting our trust in someone else. So I want to, just as a non-practicing doula, applaud both of you for the work that you do, for putting that education as such a priority, for that knowledge transfer and everything. And for those of you guys listening to this, like, I know there's a lot of information out there about doulas, and they just squeeze your hips, or they just do this, but like, it's so much more than that. It's having that information, and I think we've said this before, Dawn, but it's allowing the doula to have all the knowledge that you need without you being overwhelmed by it. It's their experience and their training and their vault of okay, this is how things are unfolding, let me give you this information, without you having to be the expert on it, right? So
Real.
again, as a non-practicing doula, I just want to point that out because I had doulas for all 4 of my births, and I wouldn't have had 4 kids if I didn't have a doula at my first, and I wouldn't have had beautiful experiences and feel empowered and like know that my body could do all of these things without a doula. So
Right. Well, and I think too, Traci, you kind of alluded to this, but I think that something that is missing oftentimes from like the understanding of a doula is that we are quite literally the only people who see birth in all locations with the different providers, with the different nurses, home birth, hospital birth, birth center birth. Like, I mean, we get, and of course you get in 20 plus years like you and I are at this point, then we really have a plethora of information, and not just a plethora of information, but it's completely different information than what the hospital is working with, what the obstetrician is working with even midwives and home birth are working with, right? We have a view, we have that 10,000 foot view of birth. We see what works, who's doing it great, who's doing it terrible, what hospitals' policies are from one place to another. I mean, forever in my community, there was only 1 or 2 hospitals that were allowing women to eat and drink during labor. All the rest, and this was like for years, all the rest of the hospitals still had the ice thing. And that was up until just maybe 6 years ago. There was still hospitals saying like, oh no, we only give ice chips, you know, and you're just like, my last patient had a frickin' burger, like at a hospital 5 miles down the road. And that part, I think, is the thing that really gives us.
But also we have the capacity. We don't have to think about the medical things that are going on with a patient when a provider and even a labor and delivery nurse has to manage what's happening in the health and well-being. We can dive into our people's lives emotionally and spiritually, and yes, physically, but I really think that we have the awesome position and opportunity to be able to carry a family unlike a provider or a labor and delivery nurse. They want to, they just don't have the capacity sometimes to do that. And I think some people are really very surprised about midwifery care sometimes. They say, well, I didn't hire a doula because I thought that I was going to get that holding space or that connection or that I needed, and they didn't realize that maybe that certain midwife did not have that capacity and they could only manage the labor because the labor was, you know, its boss. It does the things that it needs to do, so therefore that provider has to switch over into management mode, so they don't have the capacity to do all the things that we get to do because we don't have the responsibility that they do.
Right.
And it's just it's just a really special role. I just feel like it's a special role, special team.
I think also, like, you know, what we see and what like media depicts birth as is just been so distorted for so many years. I still like watch even like Friends or any kind of like movie, TV show, like growing up, like that's what you equate birth to, right? Because that's what you see. And then when like no one has doulas in the TV shows, right? Like now I can't even watch anything, and my poor husband, like I comment on it, like I cringe whenever like there's a birth. I'm like, but they did this and this and that, and he's like, can you just not? And I'm like, I understand it's like movie magic, whatever, but like some sort of, you know, this is how people are gathering information. I mean, you know, now with social media, there's so many more opportunities to do that, but like as you know, I'm 35, so I was on the cusp, and, you know, it was ingrained that this is how birth looks, right? So I think the biggest, like, faux pas of all of that is that there's so many different pathways and avenues of, like, roles, right? Like, and no one really crosses over. Like you said, the medical provider's there for the medical aspect of it. Lactation consultant is there for the feeding. Most of us go to pediatricians and ask questions, but the pediatrician is not necessarily trained in lactation, right? Our pain and in recovery or even pregnancy, a physical therapist or a chiropractor, pelvic health therapist can help that, not your OB, right? Like there's just so many different roles that are necessary, and I think we see them as like extra or unnecessary, but like if we think about how intricate, right, pregnancy, birth, postpartum all is, like how really dynamic in all of these aspects are, it's like wild. So I feel like a doula, beyond her own role, is that then connector, right? Like the doula knows, go see a pelvic floor therapist, go see acupuncturist, go see a chiro, go see a mental health therapist. Like they have the referrals because that's what, you know, their network is, or at least I've seen that more and more recently. Whereas like the medical provider is just gonna be like, go Google it, right? And then you get into that Google rabbit hole. So I think just, I want to put that out there, like beyond the in-person, like information, comfort seeking, like they have the village that you're needing for, again, whatever individualized thing comes up.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that about, like, if you just found out you're pregnant, the first thing you should be doing is connecting with a doula in your community, because they're going to be able to tell you who the good providers are. Like, don't wait. Like, your doula knows exactly who the good providers are in the community, and you don't even have to question it, you know? So it's like that should be your first question is like, okay, who would you go to in the community for a provider, you know? So, but I want to also just kind of, you know, Traci, I love the video the other day that you did. I mentioned it before we started, but just like that, don't come at me. Don't get mad at me. Like, can you explain that video and like what it was about and what drove it?
Yeah, I had seen a video of somebody that was trying to put themselves in labor because they were wanting to go into spontaneous labor before their induction date.
I see it.
And I see that a lot. I see the taking on responsibility for making my body go into labor. And it's mostly attached to when I ask why, I just don't want to be induced, or I would really love to go into natural labor, I think is what I'm seeing birth culture deem the spontaneous labor. I just don't want to be induced. And so when I commented, why would you want to be induced, or why would you need to be induced? This person said, are you just, you know, against all inductions? Well, you're a doula, so you must be against all inductions. And I think in birth culture, doulas are looked at as only present when there's not epidurals, which is totally a misconception. I think back when we first started, Dawn, you know, we were trying to swing the pendulum back from everybody, the epidemic of inductions to childbirth education, actually. And then, you know, hey, there is another way. You don't absolutely have to have an epidural, because in the 80s and really the beginning of the 90s, everybody was getting these epidurals. So we were just kind of swinging that back. And then I think we swung it back a little bit too hard. But anyway, was, you know, trying to say, I'm just the middleman. Don't get mad at me for providing more information than maybe your provider or maybe birth culture has to give you, and making you think about why you're doing what you're doing. And that's what I get a lot of is for the most part, people are very appreciative, because it's like, oh, I'm so thankful that I knew that. And then the other side is, wow, I wish I had known that when I was having my babies, or I'm so glad that I go into this birth because the last birth was really traumatic. I wish I had all the information or the other options. But there are some people that, you know, are going to think that just because they are told something that has to happen. And I just want to break that myth that we have agency and autonomy. We have the freedom to govern ourselves and the right to make informed decisions with everything that, and so when you're challenging that critical thinking process, I think there's just a cognitive dissonance of, oh, you are just a doula, and why are you questioning all authority? And I'm like, and so of course, me being Generation X, I'm like, why aren't we questioning authority? But I understand that we are now in a birth culture to where, you know, when our parents said, just do what your doctors say, it is now again coming back around to they are our doctors and they apparently know everything, and I'm just over here saying no, they don't have time, or maybe they don't, or what I call a red flag of omission of education. If they might not mean to not give you the whole other side of the story, but they're not giving you the whole side of the story, and I just might hurt some feelings.
Yeah,
Right. So I think too, what's happening, or which I see more often than not, is there's not even a consideration for the conversation.
no.
It's like in most cases, like if you just read people's comments everywhere, it's just like, and I just saw this influencer talk about her traumatic birth that she just had, and like she did have preeclampsia, so she did, it did require an induction, but the whole process, of course, was just a nightmare. And she's talking about it, but it was interesting the way she delivered it. She's like, because this is how it always goes, right? Well, so we're going to break your water. It comes in with a hook. We're going to break your water. Da, da, da. There almost is never the discussion of the risks, benefits, alternatives to any of those things. And so guess what? She got an infection, right? Which they likely, I mean, I don't know for sure, obviously, but knowing the system the way that I do, they likely said nothing of the sort to her when they said, okay, well, we're going to break your water to see if we can get this to go along. But by the way, this is going to potentially introduce infection, and now we're on this train of infection, which means antibiotics, and now the baby, like all the things.
Because nobody's saying that she doesn't need an induction. It's the, now we have a diagnosis, and now we're going to treat you as just a standard of practice, but we're going to leave out the strategy, and then we're going to leave out how can we, here are your options to doing this in this way. But first of all, we're not even having the conversation of, do you agree that this needs to happen? Because, and that's where we're running into as educators, is people are being told these things and they don't have a thought process about it. It's like, oh, my doctor told me I had A, B, and C, and I'm now scheduled for a 39-week induction. And they're all blindsided by like, now what do I do? I'm like, well, are you okay with that? What information did you get with thinking that you needed? Well, my doctor said that. Well, get into their heads about why they're saying what they're saying. Oh, I would never want to question my doctor. Why not?
Right.
This is your body. This is what's getting ready to happen to you.
My son was at, we were at T-ball on Saturday, and there was one of, the T-ball moms, very, very, very pregnant. And I was like, oh, what do you do? Trying to meet new moms and whatnot. And she's like, oh, I'm getting induced on Monday if she doesn't come by then. And I was like, oh, why? What's going on? Doesn't know me from Joe, so they don't know my history and everything. And she's like, oh, well, I'm 40, so they won't let me go past my due date, and, because I'm old and the risks. And I was like, I'm just going to shut my mouth because we are at T-ball and it is 9 a.m. on a Saturday and all my kids are here. But, in my head was like, so being 40 is a diagnosis now? I don't understand. Mm-hmm. I wanted to tell her so badly, just don't go in. What if she comes 2 days later? It's not going to not going to make a difference. And I'm like, I have no place. And it's so hard. It's once it's really hard to not say anything.
What makes me want to, so that immediately, I had somebody just commented actually on one of my videos this week that my doctor, as soon as I went in, they just basically, doctor's words were exactly this: we are absolutely not letting you get to your due date because you're 39. There was no thought process of oh, do I want to get induced? What are the risks? Am I willing to do the risk assessment of understanding that okay, so there's a 2% risk of something terrible happening, but my risk of cesarean is 25 to 45% as a first-time mom. But my risk of something bad happening to me and my baby because I'm 39 is 2%. They're not ever being given the option to weigh. It's this is the thing that makes me crazy about even the whole 41-week thing. Mm-hmm. Right? It's oh, no, we can't. Traci, you and I started 20 plus years ago. Everybody went to 42 weeks. There was never even a discussion about induction before 42 weeks. Now, when we got to 42 weeks, we were like, okay, we can't go past 42 weeks. That risk for stillbirth jumps significantly. And like everybody was cool with it. But that was because only 2% of people actually made it to 42 weeks. So it was just not a problem. And our C-section rate was significantly lower when this was happening.
And now people aren't even allowed to their due date, it seems like. It's like 39 weeks. I'm like, wait, you got a whole week left to bake in there. What's going on?
But so I kind of took a left turn there. But this 41 week thing, like, oh, now we can't let you go past 41 weeks. And again, it's like, they just say, and then the client might say, why? Right? And the response is, the risk of stillbirth doubles. That sounds terrifying. It doubles, but nobody wants to say that it's still less than 2%.
And there's a lot of providers that are
yeah, but the risk of cesarean with induction is 25 to 45%. Like, we just are never giving people the opportunity to understand the risks, benefits, alternatives to all of the things that could happen.
But I don't think that but we haven't even give people the opportunity to think that they can even ask for those things. Right. They are being made to walk into these doctors' offices like they have no voice in general. And that's what birth culture has created. Like, I can't ask for more because wouldn't that mean that they were withholding something from me if I asked for more? Well, maybe. So hold your provider accountable for the education that you're not getting or the information that you're not getting if you don't feel good about it. But then, so you have some people that are like, well, I'm not feeling really good about this, but if they say that I have to do it, then I must have to do it. This must be the safest route for me to go. No. Standards of practice is not individualized care. They are practicing the very same for everyone in their practice. And so if they say you have this diagnosis, you need to be induced at 39 weeks, they're doing that for everyone with that diagnosis. You need to have a conversation with them.
Right. Gestational diabetes is a perfect example of that, right? Like, oh, automatically, you have been diagnosed with gestational diabetes, you're doing an induction at 39 weeks. It doesn't matter if they've controlled their sugars throughout their pregnancy. It doesn't matter if the baby is looking large or not. It doesn't matter, like, none of the actual facts that could have a negative outcome with gestational diabetes are being individually considered. Yeah. And they would be if the patient said, wait a second.
Well,
what if I don't want to be induced? Right. What can I do to avoid that induction? But unfortunately, they're just like, no. In most cases, they're just like, nope, this is what we do.
But even if they come up with, even if you have somebody that says, I don't want to be induced, what are my other options? Then you have the soft coercion. Then you have but here are these risks, which is a spectrum, and they go all the way over here to fatalities with shoulder dystocia because you have a big baby. So you either have red flag of omission of education because they don't want somebody to be educated to be able to make an informed decision, or they have soft coercion and they make parents feel terrible about any decision that's against theirs.
Yeah.
And those are the two that I see probably the most, is parents just want to be good parents. But also the reason why I think that I'm seeing this maybe fawning or I don't feel like I can ask more questions is because of all the childhood trauma that we're talking about has stemmed from whatever they didn't get in their own household or the way that they were raised, or maybe culturally around, yes, the world, but really in the South where I'm at. You're just taught to be a good girl. You sit down, you shut up, you don't speak, especially if you're a church girl. So you don't have a voice, especially if you were married in that conservative Christian world. We don't even get to question our husbands, much less a doctor that I don't know anything about pregnancy. So I feel like there's this foundational root to all this too, and the reason why I educate the way that I do. And if people want to get mad at me, they can get mad at me. I'm 51. I have no filter. I don't care at this point.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that in so many capacities, right? So with my second child, I use this terminology all the time, and it validates your point. Like, I was the difficult child during my second pregnancy, because I was questioning the providers and because I was not letting them just say, oh, you have this diagnosis, this is what we're doing. I switched providers 3 different times, wound up going to a birth center, wrote a whole letter to the birth center OB and was like, this is why I'm going to be able to do this, and don't look at any of my medical records because they're all bullshit. And luckily I was able to, convince her, and had a beautiful unmedicated water birth at the birth center 2 weeks after COVID lockdown. So it was literally a blessing in disguise, because I would have been masked by myself in a hospital somewhere with like hazmat suits, I swear. And I still to this day, like 5 years later, say, oh yeah, it's because I was the difficult child. But like, no, I wasn't a difficult child. I was an informed freaking woman that decided not to take their bullshit, So I'm claiming right now that I'm not going to use that terminology anymore, but it's almost as a mechanism to relate, right? Like, oh, everyone understands. And it's hysterical too, because that baby is now my difficult child. But in the same term, like, he's my mirror. I look at him and I'm like, yeah, I'm teaching him to be like, autonomy and have his personal authority. So it's a whirlwind, though.
I mean, and you just said it. It is a generational thing that we have to find our voice. So as doulas, that our clients can find. If we don't have our doula voice and advocacy, and that's why I train in birth room advocacy, is because if a doula doesn't have that, she can't, or they can't advocate well for their families, and their families are definitely not going to find their voice because they don't have anything to mirror it after. But we do the same thing with our kids. My oldest daughter just this morning said Daniel has gotten to where he's so self-aware. He's 2.5, and if he is overstimulated in a crowd, he will ask to go outside, and she knows exactly what he's asking for. And I said, but you created that world that he is able to self-reflect at 2.5 and say, baby, what do you need? I said, I wish that I had been able to give you that as a child and know more, but I didn't know more about myself too. But he's only able to do that because she has learned herself to be able to give that to her child. And that's what I want for our parents. I want our parents to learn that this is not, we have been labeled through time and in birth culture for forever, whatever it is, all the diagnoses that hang over our heads, whether we're, high maintenance or whatever the term is that we have to be titled to, and then we carry that over, for relatability. But I think we believe that about ourselves. For years, I thought that I was high maintenance and, overly emotional or hyperactive or whatever they called me when I was in school before ADHD medications or all the things. But that carries over into our prenatal appointments, into the birth room, that I feel like providers use sometimes, because I've seen it. If a patient goes into a prenatal appointment and they're insecure, doc is going to absolutely take control of that conversation and say, well, let me just take care of you. This is what we're going to do, because they don't have the confidence in their own questionability, or should I even be questioning you in the first place? And I warn all of everybody that runs across me that if you don't take charge of your care will be taken charge of.
We had Caitlin from Be Her Village on the show, and she had a quote that just has stuck with me. And in fact, I put it in my talk. She said, I realized with my second that I needed to be an active participant. And she said, with my first, I was just kind of going with the flow, right? I just thought I remember this feeling exactly even with my first kid. I was just like, I went to the doctor my insurance suggested. I didn't even know I could investigate or choose someone. I went to the hospital-based childbirth education class. I read the What to Expect When You're Expecting, which scared the shit out of me, basically. And I literally said, Traci, these were the exact words. As I'm laying on the OR table after not enough time, 8 hours, not even with my first baby, I was on the OR table and I looked up at my husband and I said, well, that childbirth education class was a total waste of time. That's what I said. Or 6 weeks of childbirth education classes was a total waste of time. That's how I felt in the moment, because I literally was not prepared for everything that just happened to me. I wasn't even fucking close. And with the next one, I was like, I'm going for a VBAC. I'm doing, I'm doing my education. And that's what I like. If there's any first time mom listening right now, I don't want that for you. I don't want you to decide or realize that you need to be an active participant in your next birth, because most of us got there through trauma.
Right.
Right. And I said, the other thing that I said the other day is that almost every trauma story that I've ever heard starts with the sentence, "I didn't know." And I think, like, I am not, and I know, Traci, you know, we've seen each other's videos. Like, I am not anti-doctor. I'm not anti-hospital. I'm not anti-induction. Although lots of people want to say that about me and put me in that thing, or that I'm some crunchy person who thinks people should be given birth in the hot tub. I'm okay if you want to give birth in the hot tub. I'll support you all day long. But what I'm desperate to help people understand is they need to be an active participant, so that they don't have to start that sentence after a trauma that says, "I didn't know." That's why I do this. It's not
I had somebody comment,
right. It's not to be anti anything.
I had somebody comment underneath one of my comments somewhere that said, it was under the eating and drinking and labor thing, and she said, well, we literally took a my hospital's childbirth education class said what the policy was, or the policy was outdated. And I said, this is one reason why not to take childbirth education classes in the hospital, is because, and she said, no, they literally told us it was an outdated policy. I said, what policies did they go over? Well, they went over all the hospital policies. What else did they go over? Did they go over any options? Did they go over the labor stages and phases? Did they tell you what to expect in contractions? Did they, all of the nuanced things that usually a good 6 to 8 weeks course is going to give someone? It's not a one day. It's not about different position changes, how to breathe through pushing, all those things. And I think a light bulb went on in her head, and she's like, oh yeah, it was just a one day. This is what the hospital thinks, which is not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea to get into the head of where you're going to be, so that you know what to expect. But that's not all. Don't put
education though.
It's not. It's just, this is what they think. This is what they expect from you. This is how they're going to take care of you. And then you go and you actually take a very deep, comprehensive childbirth class, and all the ins and outs and what to expect, what's unexpected, what are all of your options, and what are your questions all the way around everything else. But parents think that, or some of them just fall into that, I just call it falling into the system, being passive, because they think they're going to get all the information that they need. Because why wouldn't they? That's what we were trained to think. Yeah, why wouldn't they?
I thought too. I thought my doctor was gonna. I thought that between the childbirth class and that book and my doctor, that my doctor was gonna fill in the gaps.
Same.
Not knowing that my appointment with him would be 6 minutes.
And I went to all midwives with mine, thinking the exact same thing, and absolutely did not get anything that I needed.
No. And I think, I hate that we're labeled oftentimes as something else, but this is really what we're about. We're about the fact that we want you to have all of your options, all of the information surrounding those options, so that you don't come at the end and go, what the hell just happened? What the hell just happened? I had no idea. And
I did.
Worse is coming out of it thinking that your body failed you, your pelvis was too small, your baby was too big, your body's broken. How many women tell us, Traci, I had to quit breastfeeding because I never produced enough milk. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I just had a call of a postpartum mom who literally in the middle of the conversation, she was looking for some postpartum support. In the middle of the conversation, she just starts to sob because she's not breastfeeding anymore, because her breast milk never came in properly, And I said, and she was just like, I apparently don't make enough milk. And I'm like, let's have a discussion about your birth. And let me guess, it was a 2 or 3 day induction. You were on IV fluids the whole time. You ended in a cesarean, and now your breast milk hasn't come in properly. That doesn't have anything to do with you or your body being broken. It's that they broke the normal physiological process that your body needs to go through in order to get breast milk in properly. You were likely severely engorged, meaning your baby could not latch onto your breast properly, and you didn't have that support. She's like, well, I had a lactation visit in the hospital. I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. And that person didn't tell you any of those things, did she? And she said, no. And she just starts sobbing. And she goes, nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever said that that could be happening. And it's like, that's the stuff that drives me every day, is how many women think that they're broken.
I don't know if you saw the video that stirred up a lot of controversy. I don't know, it's been maybe about a month ago. I put that, I'm over here educating families, and it's, and the professionals are saying that I'm giving medical advice and to stop giving medical advice, but that's holding them accountable to give the education that these families need. And what happened was there was just so many people that were like, well, stop giving medical advice. Education that anybody can find online
not medical advice.
It's not medical advice. Medical advice would be me saying, in my professional experience and in my opinion, I don't think anybody needs to have an IV in labor, or I don't think you need to A, B, and C.
Right.
An educator is going to say, these are your options for having an IV in the hospital. Mostly that's where you would get one. And, here are your risks, here are your benefits. How do you feel about it? Think about when you go into the hospital, think about where you are in labor, think about, whatever. And using the perspective of the hospital. This is what your nurses are going to think. This is what your hospital is going to think. That's what an educator does.
Right.
What I think is happening is those people that say don't give medical advice, first of all, don't know the doula educator role. They don't think that doctors are not educating. I think they think that doctors are educating, and I've seen this kind of nuanced conversation also where a doctor will give their education and then their patient will not take it, thinking that the doula talked them in or out of it. Now let's all say that we do our jobs well, okay? There's some people that just don't do their jobs well. Everybody needs to do bias checks. Everybody on the birth team needs to make sure that whatever education they are bringing in, they are not steering their client patient to a certain way.
Yes.
But I think that these things are coming up because either we're doing it better, or they are just under this impression, or they have this perception that there's this illusion of the hierarchy, and there's this hierarchy of professionalism that if you don't have a license, if you don't have training, if you have not taken a test and somebody tell you that you can do something, you should not be doing it. And I say illusion because the hierarchy of power in the medical system is an absolute illusion. We all have different roles to play, as we said in the very beginning. Provider is going to provide medical expertise. Right. Expertise. Labor and delivery nurses are going to do all the things that they know how to do to manage this labor, take care of their patient. Doulas are going to do their thing, can include, doesn't always include, and I want anybody who's listening to this to know that not all doulas are childbirth educators.
Yes.
Right.
Do they have to be? No, they do not. So when you are interviewing your doula, please make sure you're interviewing to meet your need. Like, what is your need? Do you need emotional support because you don't have a mama? Do you need physical support because you know that this baby needs to rotate well, or whatever? But not all doulas are educators, and it's okay. They're going to get you the education that you need. They're just going to outsource you maybe for that.
So
But
I've been looking at your background the whole time, the keeping your powers.
Power
Yeah.
the process.
Yeah.
That's her thing.
This whole conversation is just screaming that, right? And not even keeping your power, but like the doula reminds, through the education, like reminds the patient to keep their power. But it's also a transfer of power.
Yes.
I think, right? Transfer of knowledge, but even more so a transfer of power with the provider, with the doula, with the mom, it doesn't have to be this like vast, like I'm giving over my power to you, and then the doula trying to like push it back, right? Like that's what I feel like it is. But like Dawn said, like that linear, like the power is in your role, right? So, but ultimately, the mom should have all of that power, right? To choose, to have the education, to feel like everyone's got her best interest, right? And obviously we can go into that for a whole nother
Well,
level.
keeping your power for families. So the whole keeping your power concept, which is trademarked, it's everybody has worth. And everybody is worthy to have enough to make confident yes or no decisions. And so keeping your power for families is that. What needs to be happening is, here is what I know. How do you feel about it? And not dictatorship. Red flag of dictatorship is, I think you're having a big baby. I feel like you need to be induced at 39 weeks, putting you on the schedule. We don't want a risk of shoulder dystocia. Okay, done. We're done with our conversation. And then parents are all like stressed, and now they're like, oh no, of course I don't want my baby to get stuck. And then I say, because I want them to have the power of critical thinking, decision-making process, how do you know that that's going to happen? Well, I don't. Do you need more information on that? Well, I think I do. You want to ask your doctor? Do you want me to send you some studies? What makes you think that this, so it's all the giving the permission for them to have the risk assessment. It's not up to me. And as a doula who daily does bias checks, because I get triggered on the trending parts of these, right? Okay, you have low fluid. Okay, big baby. Okay, you're getting ready to go over your due date. Okay, your advanced maternal age. Okay, gestational diabetes, high BMI. Like, name it. And it's all out there. But it is up to the person that is growing the human to be able to say, I don't believe that applies to me because of my mind process, which is actually part of evidence-based care, for that person to be able to say, it's not me in this category. I see where you're coming from as my provider. I hear you, but I don't believe that that's where I am. How can we work together for both of us to look at all of the information and come to some kind of relationship conclusion? And people call that shared decision making, and I don't really like that either, because the power is in the process of the family, but we're not giving them enough to have power in the process.
That's right. So I love Hermine Hayes Klein. I don't know if you know her. She was on the show. She's a human rights lawyer, and she actually did a talk at Cedar Sinai in LA. She was talking about, and one of her quotes was that, shared decision making is nice, but ultimately the shared part is the discussion. The decision is solely the parents. Legally. Right. She was talking about it from a legal aspect, not just, but it's like that doesn't seem to be the mindset. Did you ever read, Tracy, In Shock by Rana Adish?
I don't think so.
If you're a reader, I highly recommend it. She was an emergency room surgeon and who was also 7 months pregnant when she had a catastrophic event. And so she tells her story about this nearly dying multiple times, what that felt like as a pregnant person, how that impacted her pregnancy, but how it really made her transfer to a patient versus a provider, and all of her negative experiences as a patient. And she goes on to talk about how they're trained and how they're trained to get people, like she basically says a doctor can pretty much convince you of whatever they want, because that's how they've been trained to do it. And they've been trained to, like, say, you don't want a vaccine or something, right? That's a perfect example. Your doctor is literally trained to keep asking you and asking you and asking you in different ways until they get the result. Because what they've been told is that if your patient goes against your recommendation, then you haven't done your job well. That's what they're taught. And the book is incredible. I mean, like, I bookmarked so many things. Like, it's just one of those books where you're just like, yes. Like, it's a doctor putting what you and I are regularly trying to communicate, but it's coming directly from a doctor's mouth. And it's incredible. I mean, she's actually teaching quite a bit about what her, so she teaches now at Boston University at the school there, at the medical school, like trying to teach these doctors informed consent and, you know, all this stuff. But anyways, she's incredible. I highly recommend it. We should put that in the show notes, Nicole, for sure.
Yeah, we definitely will.
Book for really anybody to read, but birth professionals especially, I think. We get a tremendous out of it. Anyways, we are almost at our time, aren't we, here?
Yeah.
I knew that's how this was going to go. It was going to be like fast and furious. Well, Traci, do you feel like there's anything you want to say to just like end, you know, before we just wrap it up here? Like, I feel like you always have just such good nuggets of
Well,
guidance.
I just want, I mean, there's just such a balance to this. I don't want families to fear. I don't want families to think that, you know, this is so very hard, but also it's not easy either. You know, I just want families to just have the freedom to feel like they can get the care and the answers to the questions that they have if they are not, and I'm asked so much, what questions do I ask? My provider is really good and is open to me asking all kind of questions. I just don't know what questions to ask. I say, if you're not feeling good, every prenatal appointment, if you're not feeling good about what you have just talked about, or you're getting little snippets of what your labor is going to look like, if they're not willing to talk about, if there's like, oh, we'll wait and see. No, tell me what's in your head. Get into the provider's head, build the relationship with the provider that you're seeing. I don't care if you're in a really big group. I don't care if that provider is not even going to be in your labor room. Practice getting more information. How do you feel about certain things? How does this apply to me? What, if you get a diagnosis, what does this mean? Can you give me more information on it? Can you give me some evidence-based studies on it? Especially if induction comes up, because you need to know what is in their heads. Because if what's in their heads and their standards of practice, what they've already decided for you, if you don't feel good about it, or it doesn't apply to you, and maybe it's going to heighten your risks on the other side of things, you need to know all that stuff. You need to know about that. So definitely just don't shy away from asking any kind of questions and intuition. If you don't feel good about it, you need to have deeper conversations about it.
Yeah. The questions to ask, because that actually wound up being one of our slogans on Birthify, because when we did our initial beta testing, we didn't have like an outline. This was meant to just be like a resource for them. You come here anytime you have questions, we'll schedule a regular meeting every week, Well, pretty quickly we put together that people would show up to their appointment and they would be like, I don't have any questions today. And I'd be like, I have so much to teach you, right? Like, it was just that like aha moment. And I also think about how, I mean, it really pivoted our entire model from being sort of this resources, which is what a lot of our competitors are still doing. The mom might be doing a virtual appointment, but she has to know the questions she wants to ask, when to ask it, when she's going to make the call, right? Like, she's got to know all of those things. And half the time, if she doesn't know what she wants to ask, she's not going to make the appointment, right? And so we shifted our entire process because it was realization like, no, they don't even know what to ask.
Right.
And really, this could be like as another episode altogether, this is not a lack of information. What they're dealing with is an absolute deluge of information. Mm-hmm. They are being inundated with information on social media, on podcasts and books and education classes, and and how do you figure out what's right for you? It's right. I mean, it's I think a lot of this that we're dealing with is actually the issue with overwhelm, and that people are just wanting instead to just stick their head in the sand and just like la 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 la. It's gonna go fine. It's gonna be fine. I'm gonna be fine. I can't make all of these decisions. It's too many decisions, right? And I think that this, again, is why really solid childbirth education class and or a really solid doula that has lots of experience is critically important for most people, So anyways, I think that's like a whole nother episode, really. The information overload for clients. Mark that down, Nicole. That'd be a good one. But anyways, Traci, we ask everyone at the end of every episode, speaking of the village, besides your work as a doula, what do you think is the most critical role that most pregnant people should have filled in their support in their village?
I think I see everybody as individuals, so I don't think that this is like straight across the board for everyone. I think that the power in the process is everybody, their core family, okay? The person that's growing the human, and that side person, whether it's a spouse or a sister, a mother, or a partner, that core people need to figure out what they need the most. And then they need to make sure that they're giving themselves permission to ask for help, because sometimes that's where I see families stop at, is we got it. Or maybe they're limited on time or maternity, the time frame of postpartum and those kind of things. So I want the core families to guard their spaces, figure out what both of them need, especially the one that's giving birth. Don't hesitate to ask for help. Guard your space. Guard your space, and guard your space meaning honor yourselves in the postpartum period of time. And it's not about making everybody else happy. It's not about making your mom happy, your mother-in-law happy, your sisters, your extended family. It's about you healing and recovering well, because you don't want breastfeeding to go badly. You don't want that maybe traumatic birth to go into a traumatic postpartum. So I really want families just to focus on themselves and their needs before they can really even think about like who to reach out to, because different people might need different things. I feel like we just need to value ourselves better and more in the postpartum period.
I think that's a great
Love
answer.
that.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to look outside yourself if you don't even know what you want or who you are or what you need, right? So, well, Traci, gosh, thank you so much. What a great episode this is. I hope people will find a lot of value in it, and I appreciate your time and just excited to keep watching you grow and see you expand out there on social media. It's fun to watch, and you're so good at it. So I appreciate you. And if you want to find her, she's on TikTok, she's on Instagram. Where else are you? Traci Doula, all over the place, right?
I try to be. Whether people like it or not, I'm there. I'm not going anywhere.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for
Thanks,
being
Don.
with us.
Thanks,
and
Nicole.
thanks for tuning into the show today. I hope you left with some value, and we appreciate you so much, and we'll see you next time.